Present for
There I am. I'm presenting to everybody. Can I X this little silly box out here?
Yeah.
All right. Didn't want to shut the machine down. Anyhow, in the back, in the truck box, there's an SGC power cube, which is a 500 watt nominal RF amplifier for HF, and it draws up to 120 amps when you're transmitting. There's a Dentron desktop tuner in the back also to help make that amplifier work with the antenna I'm carrying. For the low power operation day to day, I have an ICOM AH4 automatic tuner. And then I have two Group 24 starting batteries in the truck. And those are basically to provide the big surge of power when you transmit on HF. So this refurbishment problem started a few months ago. The ICOM 706 would transmit some, but every time you tried to run it on high power, it would just shut itself off. And I scratched my head for a while until I figured out that was a voltage drop issue. The HF bug catcher antenna that I had on there was broken because the tire shop ran it into the overhead door after being warned numerous times to open the door all the way, of course. There were some charging system issues, low charge voltage, and intermittent vehicle starting issues. And most important, the battery kept going dead overnight with all the radios and the non-stop gear that I've got hooked up turned off. So I got real annoyed with this. It was a problem for quite a while. So the first thing I did to try to overcome these issues was I installed a new towing package type alternator, 150 amp output, which was bigger than the 130 that was in there. While I was down there, I added a big heavy number 4 cable to bypass or to, in addition to the original charging system harness. And the factory harness is only a number 6 wire, so it's only really going to be good for 60 amps or so, which is kind of worthless when you have a 150 amp alternator. So I installed that from the charging terminal, the B+ terminal, the alternator back up toward the battery. Once we got that big fat wire underneath the hood, everything, by the way, is very carefully tie wrapped and grommeted so that we don't have chafing, rubbing through, and fire issues. So if you look here with this, there we go. The number 4 comes from the alternator up to this great big red fuse block, and then over to the battery terminal. And then what was already there was a big existing aluminum plate with breakers and fuses on it for the other equipment. If you're going to put anything of significant current draw in your vehicle, you want to make sure it's fused properly. This is a very nice fuse block. It's $10 or $12. It comes with a fuse in it. Mine came with a 250 amp fuse in it. I thought that was a little excessive. I dropped it down to 125 amps so that if we had a short circuit, it might blow the fuse before it burnt the truck to the ground. So I will warn everybody that plays with big current consumers in a vehicle. If you make changes to your electric system, make sure you consider every possible unintended consequence for your mods. You don't want to have to deal with State Farm or somebody like that after the vehicle catches fire from something that you did. Fuse everything. So under the hood on the Tundra is a big 120 amp busman circuit breaker. It's a manual circuit breaker. It's thermal. And basically you can go up and you can push a little red button on top of it and open that breaker if you want to, so you can shut off the power to everything in the back of the truck. Next to that is this is one of those, it's a piece that comes from the companies that do the big and stupid stereos with the great big amplifiers and stuff. They're really the only source for mobile high current protection devices, because nobody else needs 400 or 500 amps in their Tundra. Okay, but the guys with the big stereos do. If you want a good quality fuse block to put your fuses in, there's a number of stereo shops that sell those. So anyhow, this block provides fusing for the driving lights and the radio units and the rear truck box. Also under the hood there is a 100 amp relay to turn on and off the driving lights. I have a few people that don't like my driving lights. There's also an Anderson power pole connector underneath the hood right across the battery that allows me to easily jump start the truck when I need to. Not that I ever forget and leave the radios on and run the batteries down, all 3 of them. but you can also easily jumpstart somebody else or power for one of your radios if you're running portable. So under the hood, you have all these the main battery, the power distribution board, fuses, and breakers. And you can see the yellow lines, they go down. There's a whole bunch of number 6 power and ground cables that run through the frame to the back to the truck box. Everything is grommeted, and there's any place where the wires rub up against the frame or any component, there's an extra thickness of shrink tube that's just insurance to keep sure that you don't set something on fire. In the back in the truck box is the HF amplifier, the amplifier batteries, the breakers, the fuses, and the HF tuners in the truck box. There's a lot of stuff in the truck that has nothing to do with going someplace. Okay, the cool stuff. In the back truck box, there's an ICOM AH4 tuner. It's designed for long wires, but it works most excellently with a CB whip. Anybody that wants to get started in HF mobile without a giant fight, if you will just buy one of these ICOM AH4 tuners and a CB whip, figure out where you're going to mount the whip, mount the tuner as close as you can to the antenna base. And I routinely, when I had another Toyota truck that was set up this way, I routinely went on 75 meters and made reasonable contacts. A 8-foot CB whip is not an ideal 75-meter antenna by any means, but it will get you some contacts mobile. On 40 and 20 and up, it works great. There's the tuner mounted inside this homemade aluminum box that bolts onto the truck box. And basically the big bug catcher bolts onto this box. So everything about this box is reinforced and welded. The antenna has a whole lot of wind resistance, and it causes flexing and breaking problems if you don't really build everything stout. Inside the truck box is the SGC power cube. It's a wonderful amplifier. It's no longer made anymore. It will make 500 watts continuous on 10 meters. Okay, you can put it on 10 meters and put it into a dummy load, and if you have a fan on the sucker, it's designed to run wide open throttle continuously, and it will do it. So that means that since transistors are typically way more efficient in lower frequencies, when you cut back down to 20 meters or 40 meters, you can get 6, 7, 800 watts on the lower frequencies if your power supply is up to doing the job. Okay, it needs almost 120 amps to make 750 or 800 watts on the lower bands on HF. So this big amplifier is mounted at an angle in the truck box so you can see all the controls. It's got all kind of protective stuff on it, so stupid engineers like me can't burn it up. It's an expensive amplifier, and you don't want to have to replace the transistors in it. It's got all kinds of microprocessor monitoring that keeps you from hurting it. You can see in the back there's two batteries on the far side of the toolbox, and then right in front of the amplifier there's a 100 amp power pole connector, and that's set up so that I can run other batteries in the bed of the truck if I want to run stationary without running the engine of the truck all the time. Everybody goes, what in the world do you have all this stuff in your truck for? My reason for being in ham radio, my chief reason is emergency services communications. And my first trip out to Mississippi after Katrina, 100 watts was not enough to get the job done, to get back to the state operating point. And 500 watts is. Okay, if you look down here where the big yellow arrow is, there's power leads that go to this amplifier from the fuse blocks. You'll notice that there's 2 number 6s and 2 number 4s in parallel. Okay, that's good for 120 amps DC, and it needs every bit of it if you're running it as an alligator station wide open. There's a big gray coiled cable here with an ugly rotary switch hook to it. That is the manual band switching switch. It basically allows you to change the amplifier from basically 75 to 40 to 20 and on up. And right now it's all done manually. I mean, I've only had the amplifier 15 years. I mean, so I still have a few loose ends to work on. Looking in the truck box, this is some cheap insurance. Again, I can't stress this enough. All your wires and stuff that go through the body of the truck or your vehicle or the truck box need to be grommeted. If you don't, you're asking for trouble. If you have a power lead rubbed through and the fuses don't pop and the breakers don't pop, basically you will have a fire. Number 6 wire on a car battery, if you've never shorted one, it will set the thing red hot and on fire in about 1.5 seconds. I have personally done it. It's not good. Anyhow, if an RF cable gets worn through, basically you're endangering your amplifier and your transmitter final transistors, and we all don't want to have to mess with those either. Under the back seat, oh my gosh, there's another 60 amp Anderson power pole so that you can hook up more stuff under the back seat without having to go to terminal blocks and all that kind of stuff. 60 amp Andersons are so convenient, and they're like $5. You know, you can really make your life easy if you think it through and put these in a couple of places. I'm embarrassed. This is what it looked like under the back seat in the Tundra. One of the big black box in the center is a Motorola Spectra high power. There's another one that sits on top of it, clamped on the top of it. And then on the back over here, there's the ICOM 706 radio box. And there's an inverter. And you can look across here, you can see there's barrier terminal strips, and laying on the floor, there's fuse blocks, okay? One of the things that I was having problems with my truck was intermittent problems with the transmitters. And I went through every single connection in the 12-volt power supply, from the plus on the battery and the ground on the battery all the way to the back of the truck, and pulled the connections loose, wire brushed them, and put them back together. The truck had been wired up since 2009, so that's basically 12 years. In 12 years, you will have corrosion problems, and I did. Okay, while I was there, I took this wimpy little number 10 ground link, which grounded all 3 of the radios and the inverter, and changed it to a number 6, okay? When you're dealing with a 12-volt system that uses a high current, you would be very, very surprised to see what a little bit of voltage drop does to your final power output on your radio. I'll discuss that in a little bit. Oh, who's that? I did not ask permission to have my wife in this, so I'll probably catch heck about this later. This is a picture of my bug catcher antenna when the first version was finished, and she made the mistake of coming out in the backyard, so I used her for an idea of how tall it is. The antenna is about 12 or 13 feet tall. When it's actually almost 16 feet tall when it's mounted on the truck box. That can cause problems. The mast is a piece of aluminum with a mount. The big square plate there is the thing that holds that whole bug catcher antenna on the toolbox. It's 1/2-inch aluminum plate, and there's a piece of tubing run vertically here that basically holds the mast. And there's a great big machined plastic spacer inside there that runs the entire length of the tube here. And that holds that steel rod still, okay? It requires a lot of structure to take this big antenna and put it on a truck and expect it to be able to run 80 miles an hour on the interstate, or 90 or 100, which it will do. The truck will do it, and the antenna will withstand it. I tested it. Okay, don't tell anybody. That copper mass it's a 1-inch piece of steel rod, and it's got a 1-inch nominal piece of copper tubing slid over the top of it. And because of the skin effect, all of your RF power seeks the outer part of the conductor where there's more surface area. So that's basically like having a 1-inch diameter solid copper rod holding that antenna up. Makes a great radiator. Then you can see in the foreground is the capacity hat on the Citizens Band antenna whip. When the gentleman at the tire shop ran my antenna into the garage door, it bent the mast. This is the mast base turned sideways in the vise on my milling machine. It's the only thing that was strong enough to hold that base plate tight while I put a long piece of pipe on it and tried to bend it back into shape. Here's the plastic bushing that insulates the mast from ground. You can see down here, there's a solid piece of steel. That's a solid steel rod there. The elements for the capacity hat are basically 1/4-inch aluminum rod that I bent by hand, and these were made in 2007. The flippity floppity of being run at 1 million miles an hour for 10 plus years basically has fatigued the ends of them. There were cracks, so I cut the cracked parts off and put those suckers right back into service. The ends of those flower petals go into the 8 holes on this octagon here. And then you tighten the set screws down, and that holds the capacity hat together. Then the capacity hat is held on top of the upper mast with a stainless steel bolt that I drilled through to accept the CB whip with the 3/8-inch bolt connector on the end of it sawed off. And then there's a set screw that keeps that CB whip from wiggling and coming out. So on the coil form for the bug catcher, the cage part or the center loading coil, basically it got torn up in the accident. So I had to make new plastic plates. And what I did was I cut plastic to the right diameter. It's 1/2-inch thick, HDPE, it's polyethylene. And I used the milling machine and this rotary table to bore 6 1/2-inch holes half of the way through the thickness of the plate. This little table's a great toy, and it's got a degree indicator on it, and you just take the brakes off of it and rotate the workpiece 60 degrees at a time, and you get 6 evenly spaced holes. I also remanufactured the top and bottom mast mount bushings. This is just a piece of aluminum that we turned down in the lathe. And there it is after it's turned down. Now we're boring the holes to bolt it to the plastic plate. There's the bottom bushing. And then once it was finished, we bored I think it's a 1 1/16-inch hole all the way up into that rascal so it can slide down on top of the mast. Everything here is Todd Lovelace stupid overkill, and that's what allows it to last so long and to put up with so much abuse. But then the bottom bushing was also drilled in the rotary table. Who talking to me? I'm hearing voices. This is not good. Okay, I use the lathe strictly as a 3rd and 4th hand to hold this monster while I was trying to wind it. And you can see the new top mast bushing and the bottom mast bushing and the new end plates. They're all put together, and then they're clamped in the lathe, but I can rotate it around to wind it. First thing I did was to just get some solder and stretch it out and run it around through the little indentions in the poles to make sure that the winding looked evenly spaced, and it did. Then I went back and did it again with number 8 solid copper. Wow, I was wore out when I got done with this. Copper wire that you use for grounding, like it comes from Home Depot or Lowe's, is not very much annealed, so it's not real soft. It's hard to start with, and every time you bend it a little bit, it hardens just that much more. So when you pull it off of the spool at Home Depot and unroll it, it hardens. When the guy rolls it back up and puts some tape around it at Home Depot, it hardens it some more. So by the time I got to it, it was not fun. But anyhow, we got it on here, and I got about halfway through, and I had to stop. I got a pair of vice grips and held it still there while I rested my hands. Notice that there's little grooves in the bars to the cage, and those hold the copper wire in a pretty nice, evenly spaced manner. When I got done with winding those on there, I held the copper wire with one hand and used my electric drill to drill a couple of holes and poke the wire through the ends to make sure it stayed there. Okay, one of Todd's cheapness things here. I don't ever throw away old coax. I always cut pieces off of my old nasty coax, strip the plastic insulation off, and pull the center conductor out. The braid on RG8 or 4413 is about the same as a piece of 12-gauge copper wire, but it's way more flexible. Okay, then the piece of cable that comes from the inside of the braid is very nice. It's about a number 14 wire, but it's got basically 4,000 volt insulation on it. It's great to use coming out of your tuner, going to your antenna or something like that. And then I throw out the plastic. So I took 2 pieces of this braid and stretched it out and doubled it up. It took a while to figure out how to do this, but basically got new alligator clips, and one piece of braid is hooked up to a terminal, a crimp terminal, and the other one gets crimped in the end of the alligator clip. So now you have 2 pieces of number 12 wire basically for your flexible links here. Then you put some shrink tube on it and shrink it down. And then I go back and put another piece of shrink tube over that. I have a paranoia of high voltage on antennas. If you run mobile high power, you will find that they get out of tune easy. When they get out of tune, the current goes up and things get set on fire. I actually burnt up a Radio Shack alligator clip at a Boy Scout camp one night in the middle of the night, set it slap on fire. It was pretty impressive. 75 meters running it wide open, talking to Australia. Okay, remember that HF antennas, even at the 100 to 150 watt level, you can have 10,000 volts on that piece of wire or more. So I double insulated everything. Here's the center loading coil, all assembled with the link on and everything. You'll notice that the copper on either end basically is a bolted connection to the aluminum. Efficiency of antennas is based very heavily on what they call radiation resistance and also on the physical resistance of the antenna coils. So the better connections you can make, the higher your antenna efficiency is. Here's the finished product sitting on the truck. Being that I destroyed the last antenna because I had 16 feet of whip sticking on top of the truck, I put a 90-degree bracket on this one and have it tied off with a piece of nylon rope to the back bumper. I'll come up with something better than that one of these days. Okay, you can see the L bracket and the entire assembly sitting there. At the bottom of the mast, there's a amplifier matching coil. It's another piece of number 8 wire. It's wrapped around a Maglite flashlight body to make a nice form, and then you can use one of these flexible links that we just talked about to change the impedance that the amplifier sees. Okay, when I'm running low power with the AH4 ICOM tuner, I just bypass the coil, and that's what this link here is for. It just basically shorts it out of the circuit. This out, that's the output of the tuner coming from the ICOM tuner, the little tuner, over to the input jack for the antenna, and then down around through bypassing the coil and then up to the mast. What a mess, but it works. A little bit less of a mess under the back seat now. There's only one of the Motorola Spectras is installed there. There's another one that looks just like it that sits on top of it, and there's some clamps that hold them together. Each of those radios has number 6 wires going to it to provide power. Motorola is serious about getting power to their 110 watt radios. Okay. At this time, I stopped and I got my Bird watt meter out and took it out, and I measured the power available from both the ICOM 706 and the 2 Motorola Spectras. Typically, you get 60 or 65 watts out of an ICOM 706 on VHF, and I was getting 100. That was based on a Bird meter. Okay, that's the standard. So I have no reason to think it was lying to me. The only reason I can say that that is happening is because I now have 13.8 solid volts at the back where the radio is mounted. And when I key up, the voltage does not drop down to 11.5 or 12. Okay, so the radio makes the rated power and a little bit more. Same thing with the Motorola Spectra. Both of my Spectras now, instead of making 110 watts, they put out 150. I was very pleased. Okay, it was a lot of work, and the results worked out very well. There's a couple of things that I want to do that I have not done on this truck. If you run HF, one of the important things to do to get good antenna efficiency, regardless of whether it's a big bug catcher or whether it's one of the little short antenna kits, bond the body panels together. The hood, the trunk lid, to the body, to the fenders, to the body, the doors, everything needs to be tied into so it's a one potential ground. Two reasons for that. That gives you a great big ground plane for that antenna to work against, which increases the efficiency. The second thing it does is it makes the steel body of your vehicle an EMP shield. It adds to the shielding that the truck body will provide to your equipment and to the engine control system, the transmission control system, all that electronic disco stuff that's on your new vehicles. Okay, I have yet to run additional number 4 welding cables from the engine to the frame and from the battery negative post to the frame. That will make sure that there's nothing in my power circuit that's not a big, heavy current carrying wire. Okay, on the antenna loading coil in the center, I'm going to make some bolted connections somehow to where I don't have an alligator clip biting onto a piece of the coil there. I want to figure out where that link needs to be for each frequency and then go back and bolt a connection there. Okay. And then finally, I want to build the parts necessary to automate the band switching so I don't have to stop the truck and jump out and go back and monkey with stuff in the truck box to switch bands from 20 to 40 to 75, blah, blah, blah. So the results, replacing the alternator with an upgraded alternator, it got rid of all the dead battery in the morning issues. I believe there was a leaky diode in the alternator itself that was causing the battery to discharge back through the diode, through the alternator to ground when it wasn't being operated. Adding that new number 4 welding cables partially eliminated the low voltage during transmit. With that big amplifier in the back of the truck, you're driving down the road and you key up with 800 watts, the headlights dim. Okay? And that's even with 2 batteries back there, this far from the amplifier. That thing is a power hog, okay? And I like to use every bit of it that I can if I have to. Okay. Cleaning and tightening all the power supply connections. Oh my gosh. It restored the proper voltage to the truck box equipment and to the equipment under the back seat, as measured with my Fluke multimeter. Right at 13 volts, just like it's supposed to be. There will be a fraction of a volt drop from the alternator terminals and the battery at the front of the truck to the back, no matter what you do, because you have a length of cable there. You have voltage drop. You can minimize that by making those wires bigger. Replacing the batteries in the truck box, that really helped with the amplifier operation. I will tell you that the repaired bug catcher antenna with just 100 watts out of the ICOM 706 and the little AH4, when I was driving up to see my mom a couple of weeks ago, I talked to Central Europe, I talked to Canada, I talked to South America, and that's with the wire, the antenna tied down within 2 inches of the truck bed. That did not seem to have any negative effect on my capability. So I'm confident when I get the bolt connections for the antenna coil finished, I'll be crashing the pileups like it used to. Sander, what was his call sign? KG4FET. KG4FET came to a no-fars meeting one day and he says, I know you've got a new amplifier, I want to see that sucker. So we go over there and we got on 20 meters and there's a big pileup right in the middle of the band. And he goes, try to bust that, because all you can hear is, like a big pileup. And I went on there and I went, K1KVA, and the guy comes back and goes, go ahead, K1KVA. I just blew right through that sucker with this rig. And Sander looked at me like, and what's really great is when the person comes back and goes, what? You're a mobile? That's the ultimate. So I like that. A lot of people ask me, where do you get the parts to do these? You know, since Radio Shack is gone, Lafayette's gone, there's no place left to go local to buy parts, really. So what I do is I go to Sherco Auto Marine online. Andy Mark Robotics has stuff. Napa, Mauser DigiKey, Littlefuse, Busman, and Fastronics. You can buy those online. If you need stainless steel hardware, and I refuse to use galvanized stuff anymore, it just causes too many problems. Ace Hardware, especially the one on University, has got the most amazing collection of stainless steel hardware that you can imagine. Once you find an item that you want, be sure to check to see if Amazon's got it, because if you're working on a project, I know I hate being stopped dead because I don't have a UHF connector or something. Amazon almost always will deliver the next day. As much as I hate their politics, they do have a jam up service. The other place you could go to get some of these big heavy current pieces is the Big and Stupid car stereo supply places. The people that install the big bonk stereo systems, you can probably go in there and buy a piece of cable, buy some connectors from them. Okay. Are there any questions? Jim.
What precautions does this bonding of your shell create any Faraday shield in case of an EMP? Is your truck prevented from?
I believe that it will. The reason, okay, to jump to another subject, the people that tested in the United States for EMP found out that all the hullabaloo about cars stopping on the highway is way overblown. As of 2008, okay, that's when the testing was done. New cars have more electronic junk on them. But then they found out that only about 5% of the vehicles tested were negatively and permanently affected by an EMP pulse. Okay, the cars that have a steel body have basically a Faraday shield partially around the important stuff, and it will help. And the Faraday shield will be better. It will be improved if you bond the doors and the hood and everything together. Don't forget to bond the exhaust system to the chassis and to the rest of the things, because the flow of the exhaust gas through the conductive steel pipe creates static electricity, and that contributes to your noise on HF. Any other? Yes?
Thoughts on crimped versus soldered power connection?
Okay. In the robot competition world, we had a big, huge, like 4-week argument online, and we had all of the know-it-all engineers from 400 robot competition teams, and they all argued back and forth. Finally, somebody got out with a milliometer, and they did some real professional tests, and you know what the result was? Ain't no dang difference. Okay, I do both. You want a mechanical crimp with the crimpers, and then put some solder on it for electrical. And there I go again. That's just Todd Lovelace. You got to be kidding me, overkill.
You find that as a preventative for your corrosion?
The corrosion that I was getting was between the connector itself and the terminal block. Okay, dirt under the back seat, moisture under the back seat, basically humidity up and down in the car, air conditioning on, off. Basically, you collect dirt, you collect trash, you collect salt, haze, and you get corrosion. You have to go in at some point and clean that mess up. Wow, no questions.
Oh, what are you going to use for bonding strap?
Old coax cable with the guts cut out of it.
The outer braid.
The outer braid. Yep.
Okay.
And
are you going to tin it or just leave it?
Basically, I will have crimp-on connectors on there, crimped, and soldered.
Okay. I use the same, except it is tin. It's manufactured. That's why I bought it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The wider stuff. Have you ever checked that your antenna for common mode current?
I do not.
And have you ever checked inside the cab for RF?
I have. And if you don't have good connections, proper grounds, you will have RF in the cab.
Right.
And I think that the best way to avoid that, I mean, you have a whole stack of windows that are not Faraday shields that RF can come through. You're going to have some in there no matter what. But the big problem I've had is RF coming up on the cables themselves, and I use ferrite cores around the coaxes on the low power side of everything.
Okay, that could be common low current there.
Yes, that's what it basically is.
Yeah, I don't have any RF in mine either at 500 watts.
Okay.
I have more on my cell phone actually,
Yeah.
with the meter in here. Right?
You hear it in your radio, you hear it in,
Yeah, and with the ignition off, what's your noise level? With the ignition on, what's your noise level usually?
typically, I don't see a change on the S meter, and I can't hear a difference. You put real instruments on there, I'm sure you would see something. But for practical,
It's well grounded.
yeah. Okay. In the back.
Have you seen any issues with ECM, either with low voltage or RF?
Yes. The Tundra, not the Tundra, my previous Deluxe, which was a 93 four-wheel drive, I had the same rig in it before I bought the Tundra. And you'd be cruising down the road and key the thing up, and on some frequencies, and it was kind of spooky, you'd key the sucker up and you'd be cruising along and like, ooh, oh yeah. It gets into the ECM, the electronic control module, and you have problems. It never caused any damage, but I will tell you that the Toyota service manual, the big thick service manual, says, do not put ham radio gear in this truck. It says don't. So, and that's because most people won't go to the extent necessary to protect the engine control system.
You missed last week, but I took mine back to Ford, they blessed it.
You took it back to Ford?
Yeah.
Okay.
Make sure that I had it, because you know, with mine, they have a couple of, sorry guys. Didn't know that was mine. They have a, and I don't know if your Tundra does or not, but they got a device on the ground cable to monitor it now. And you can't mess with it, or otherwise screw up your computer. So I just took it back and said I had done it right.
Okay.
It was good.
Cool.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Plus my newer truck, not the Dodge, the Ford, is aluminum body.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do as much bonding because it is very well bonded itself. Better than the steel cast.
Okay. Cool.
It worked out good. I felt I had improved signal from you.
Cool. All right.
That's kind of cool. It was unexpected.
All right. Any other questions? If not, oh, there you are. Yes.
Yeah, I'll do this, and I got a 15 Chevrolet Silverado, and when I open the door, I get a lot of static with my radio just by opening the door.
Wow.
Yeah, can't figure it out. I get the noise blanker to shut it off.
In the ham radio.
In ham radio, handheld and mobile. And when I shut the door, and a few minutes later, after whatever settles down, it will go away. But as soon as you
Interesting.
open the door,
Interesting.
you'll have to crank the truck up.
I'm wondering about the integrity of the ground of your radio inside and the coax that goes to that radio. That's what I would be. That would be the first place I'd look. You might borrow a piece of coax from somewhere else and run it through a window and roll the window up as far as you can and try that same experiment.
What about the antenna?
How new is the car?
What's that?
What,
2015.
2015? Well, you know, they got a lot of body modules that, there's a high-speed bus, and it may be when you open the door, there's communication going on. There's so many computers in these newer cars, even going back a few years, you would be amazed, and I would recommend that you watch some of the car repair mechanic shows on YouTube. You will be amazed at the technology that they use to work on a car. It's no more wrench and screwdriver. It's you hook a computer to a computer, which talks to 15 or 20 computers that's hidden all over your car, under the seat, behind the back seat, in the trunk, under the hood, down under the car. It's a freaking internet in your car.
It is. It's called CAN bus. And CAN bus, it goes from the engine and the transmission. It controls the alternator, controls the air conditioning compressor. It goes through the window lift motors that open and close the windows. And I had a friend that had a problem with a window lift motor that took his Chrysler 300 out. It took like 6 months for the Chrysler people to figure out what the heck the problem was. It was a bad CAN bus module inside the window lift motor on the right rear side. It is a nightmare. And so I predict that those cars are going to have more EMP problems than anybody else. All right, any other? Okay, I'm officially shutting up. If y'all want to talk later, I'm always ready.
Yeah.
You really want to reboot the car.
See, Billy, want to get involved in 50/50?
You really want to reboot the
Before we
car.
close? Yeah, give me.
Wait, hopefully something that made it through to you. That's a visual
I
presentation.
have one question.
You watch another train channel and the big buck.
See you later. You going to Pie Jacks?
What?
You going to Pie Jacks?
Yeah, I just gotta get going now.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll be there. He says.
Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday.
Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah. It's pretty cool. Thanks for the invite.
Can't play like. There's like 6 people, or probably like really.
We do the 50/50 drawing, then we're gonna end it for the night. Thank you guys for showing up, by the way.
Yes.
See, you have the heat lamps on.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know how to turn it on.
I'm gonna put them on. Hey, Brandy. Next month, you're gonna be the first person to introduce yourself. Boy, I don't forget you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. 50/50. Anybody interested in purchasing 50/50, please see Billy. Anybody else interested in the 50/50 raffle? Hey, Billy, why don't you have the gentleman in the back? Give the gentleman in the back pull the ticket.
Okay, $12. We got 664062.
Somebody right after me, whoever did it after me. Whoever did it after me got it.
Got 062.
Congratulations. Hi, guys. For those that don't know, we're on Facebook, North Florida Amateur Radio Society. Come join us on Facebook. I'd like to get more involved, get some more talk and chat on that if possible. I know Josh helps me out with a lot since I'm gone. We appreciate that very much. I guess we'll see you next month. Yes, sir.
Hey, Roger, there was a gal here last time, and one of the things she was trying to figure out was what simplex versus duplex was. Remember when you were making the
You hear him because I can't hear him.
There was a gal in here last time, last meeting, and they were trying to figure out the difference between simplex, duplex, and how to program it in.
I haven't seen her, so I haven't talked to her either. No, she's not here. I know who you're talking about. Those the two ladies were sitting over here last week.
Yeah.
Or last month. Any other questions? See you next month. Thank you for coming out. Safe ride home. I appreciate that on Facebook, by the way.
Yeah, no problem.
Good seeing you,
I'm
Linda.
never around anymore, so I'm starting to do everything.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for bringing Wayne out. Wayne